Marcus Chen adjusted his grip on the plasma rifle as the transport ship shuddered through another wave of enemy fire. Around him, 20 other mercenaries checked their weapons with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who had seen too many battles. The job seemed simple enough when they took it escort a diplomatic convoy through the neutral zone between human and Valdarian space. Simple jobs, Marcus had learned, were usually anything but. 2 minutes to drop zone, the pilot's voice crackled through the comm system. Sensors are picking up heavy shadowkin activity in the area. This might get messy fast. Marcus suppressed a grimace. The shadowkin were bad news, an ancient species that fed on the life force of other beings. They had been raiding the border systems for months, taking prisoners instead of simply destroying ships. Nobody knew why they wanted captives alive, and, frankly, nobody wanted to find out. The transport lurched violently as another volley struck their shields. Through the small porthole, Marcus could see the sleek black ships of the Shadowkin fleet, vessels that seemed to absorb light itself, making them nearly invisible against the void of space. Shield generators are failing, the pilot reported, his voice tight with concentration. We need to get you down there now, or we're all going to be space dust. The mercenary captain, a grizzled veteran named Rodriguez, stood and addressed the team. Listen up, people. Our job is to secure the crash site and extract any survivors from the diplomatic convoy. Intel suggests they went down on the forest moon below. We get in, we get our people, we get out. Questions? Marcus raised his hand. What about the Shadowkin ground forces? Rodriguez's expression darkened. Assume they're already planetside. These things are smart, coordinated, and they don't take prisoners for fun. Watch each other's backs, and remember, headshots only. Their regeneration abilities make body shots useless. The transport broke through the moon's atmosphere with a bone-jarring impact that threw everyone against their restraints. Through the portholes, Marcus could see a world covered in massive trees whose canopies stretched for kilometers without break. Somewhere in that green ocean was the diplomatic convoy, assuming anyone had survived the crash. The landing was rough but controlled. As the ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, the sound of the alien forest flooded into strange bird-like calls, the rustle of massive leaves, and, underneath it all, an ominous silence that made Marcus's skin crawl. Teams Alpha and Beta, take the western approach, Rodriguez commanded as they disembarked. Gamma and Delta, you're with me going east. Marcus, you're on point for Gamma team. Marcus nodded and activated his scanner, watching as it painted a three-dimensional map of the surrounding area. The diplomatic ship's transponder was still broadcasting, though weakly, from a position roughly 2 kilometers through the dense forest. What worried him more were the other signals his scanner was picking up, heat signatures that moved in patterns too coordinated to be wildlife. The team moved through the forest with practiced stealth, communicating through hand signals and brief calm bursts. The trees here were ancient beyond measure, their trunks so massive that it would take 50 people holding hands to circle one. The canopy above blocked most of the sunlight, creating a perpetual twilight that played tricks on the eyes. After an hour of careful progress, Marcus held up a closed fist, bringing the team to a halt. His scanner had detected something that made his blood run cold, a cluster of heat signatures directly ahead, moving in a search pattern around what appeared to be the crash site. Rodriguez moved up beside him and studied the scanner display. How many? He whispered into his comb. At least a dozen, Marcus replied. Maybe more. They're spread out in a perimeter around the wreckage. Any sign of survivors? Marcus fine-tuned the scanner's sensitivity and felt his heart skip a beat. There's a faint heat signature inside the ship. Could be someone alive, or it could be a trap. Rodriguez considered their options. The Shadowkin were between them and any potential survivors, and going around would take hours they didn't have. Every minute they delayed increased the chances that whoever was in that ship would die. We go through them, Rodriguez decided. Fast and hard. Marcus, you and Thompson circle left. Williams and I will take the right flank. On my mark, we hit them simultaneously. The next few minutes passed in tense preparation. Marcus and Thompson moved through the underbrush like ghosts, using every piece of cover the ancient forest provided. The Shadowkin were good, but they were focused on the ship, not expecting an attack from multiple directions. Marcus got his first clear look at the enemy through his rifle scope and felt his stomach turn. The Shadowkin looked like nightmares given form, tall, skeletal figures wrapped in what appeared to be living shadow. Their faces were elongated and predatory, with eyes that glowed like dying stars. They moved with an unnatural grace that suggested they were far stronger and faster than they appeared. In position, Thompson whispered through the calm "Same here," came Williams's voice. Marcus steadied his breathing and lined up his shot on the nearest shadowkin. The plasma rifle would punch through their natural armor, but he would only get one shot before all hell broke loose. "Execute," Rodriguez commanded. The forest erupted in plasma fire and alien screams. Marcus's first shot caught his target center mass, the superheated energy burning through shadow and flesh alike. The creature collapsed with a shriek that sounded like tearing metal. The shadowkin reacted instantly, moving with inhuman speed toward the source of the attack. But Rodriguez had chosen the ambush point well. The mercenaries had clear fields of fire from elevated positions while their enemies were caught in the open. The battle was brief but vicious. The shadowkin fought with a desperate hunger that spoke of intelligence and purpose. They didn't just want to kill the humans, they wanted to capture them alive. That desperation made them careless, and, within minutes, the forest floor was littered with dissolving shadowkin corpses. "Clear," Rodriguez called out as the last enemy fell. "Move to the ship, fast. That noise will bring more of them." The diplomatic vessel had crashed nose-first into a massive tree trunk, its sleek hull crumpled and torn. Emergency lighting flickered weakly through cracked viewports, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. Marcus forced open the ship's emergency hatch and immediately activated his scanner to check for life signs. The device painted a grim picture, multiple red zones indicating hull breaches, radiation leaks, and structural damage throughout the ship. But there, in what appeared to be a reinforced section near the rear of the vessel, was a single, weak heat signature. "Got someone alive," he called to Rodriguez. "Rear section, past the main cargo bay." They moved through the ship carefully, aware that the damaged structure could collapse at any moment. Bodies of the diplomatic staff lay scattered throughout the corridors, victims of the violent crash. Marcus tried not to think about the fact that these had been people with families, dreams, and futures that were now cut short. The rear section was sealed behind an emergency bulkhead that had held despite the crash. Marcus used his plasma torch to cut through the locking mechanism, and the door slid open with a grinding protest of damaged metal. Inside, the scene was like something from a fever dream. The chamber was clearly designed as luxury quarters, with rich fabrics and elegant furnishings now torn and scattered by the impact. But what drew Marcus's attention was the figure lying motionless on what remained of an ornate bed. She appeared to be a young woman, perhaps 20 years old in human terms, with pale skin that seemed almost luminescent in the emergency lighting. Her hair was long and dark, spread across silk pillows like spilled ink. She wore clothing that suggested nobility, fine fabrics, and jewelry that spoke of wealth and status. But it was her ears that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. They were pointed, elegant, and unmistakably non-human. This was no member of the diplomatic staff, this was an alien, and, from her appearance, she belonged to a species Marcus had only heard about in whispered rumors. "Holy shit," Thompson breathed from behind him. "Is that a vampire?" The Valdarians were often called vampires by humans, though the comparison wasn't entirely accurate. They were an ancient species, older than human civilization, with abilities that bordered on supernatural. They were also supposed to be extinct. Rodriguez pushed past them into the chamber and immediately began checking the alien woman for signs of life. His medical scanner beeped softly as it analyzed her condition. "She's alive, but barely," he reported. "Massive blood loss, internal injuries, and her life signs are fading fast. We need to get her to medical facilities now, or she's not going to make it." Marcus found himself staring at the woman's face. Even unconscious and dying, there was something hauntingly beautiful about her features. Her skin was so pale it was almost translucent, and dark veins were visible beneath the surface like delicate tracery. Why was she on a human diplomatic ship? Williams wondered aloud. Rodriguez was already activating his emergency beacon. Questions later. "Right now, we need to stabilize her for transport." As he spoke, the woman's eyes fluttered open. They were unlike anything Marcus had ever seen, deep violet irises that seemed to hold depths of knowledge and pain accumulated over centuries. When her gaze fixed on his face, he felt something shift inside his chest, as if invisible chains were wrapping around his heart. She tried to speak, but only a whisper of air escaped her lips. Blood, dark and thick, bubbled at the corners of her mouth. Her condition was deteriorating rapidly. "The medkit won't help with this," Rodriguez said grimly. Her physiology is too different from ours. The medications could kill her faster than her injuries. Marcus knelt beside the bed, drawn by an impulse he couldn't explain. The woman's violet eyes tracked his movement, and he could see intelligence there, awareness of her situation, and something that might have been desperation. "What do you need?" he asked softly, not sure why he was speaking to her as if she could understand. To his surprise, she responded. Her voice was barely audible, but the words were clear enough. "Blood," she whispered. "Need blood." Rodriguez stepped forward immediately. "Absolutely not. We don't know what that could do to you, Marcus. For all we know, it's how they feed, how they convert their victims." But Marcus was looking into those violet eyes, seeing something there that spoke to him on a level deeper than logic. This wasn't a predator looking for prey, this was a person dying alone, far from home, asking for the one thing that might save her life. "She's dying anyway," Marcus said quietly. "And if she was dangerous, why would the Shadowkin want her captured alive? Maybe she's someone important, someone who could help us understand what's really going on in this sector." "Marcus, don't be an idiot," Thompson protested. "You don't know what you're dealing with here." But Marcus had already made his decision. He pulled out his combat knife and drew a shallow cut across his palm. Blood welled up, dark red in the emergency lighting. "If this kills me, tell Rodriguez he was right," he said, and pressed his bleeding hand to the woman's lips. The effect was immediate and startling. The moment his blood touched her mouth, color began returning to her pale skin. The dark veins beneath the surface pulsed with renewed vigor, and her breathing, which had been shallow and irregular, deepened and strengthened. But, more than that, Marcus felt something happening to him as well. As she drank from his palm, he experienced a sensation unlike anything he had ever known, not pain, but a connection, as if invisible threads were being woven between them. He could feel her gratitude, her relief, and, underneath it all, a fierce protective instinct that seemed to flow both ways. Her eyes never left his face as she drank, and Marcus found himself unable to look away. There was something ancient in those violet depths, knowledge accumulated over lifespans that stretched far beyond human experience. But there was also something young, vulnerable, and grateful. After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, she released his hand and spoke again. This time her voice was stronger, though still weak. "Thank you," she said in accented but clear English. "You have given me back my life. I am Lyraeli of House Nightbloom, Princess of the Third Circle." She paused, studying his face with new intensity. "And now, human warrior, you are mine as I am yours." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the sound of Shadowkin war cries echoed through the forest outside. Whatever respite they had gained was over, the enemy had found them, and this time they were coming in force. Rodriguez was already moving toward the ship's exit. "We need to go, now. Transport's inbound, but we have to reach the extraction point." Marcus helped Lyraeli to her feet, surprised by how quickly she had recovered. The blood had worked better than any medical treatment he had ever seen. She was still weak, but she could walk, and her eyes were alert and focused. As they moved through the ship, she stayed close to his side, her hand occasionally brushing against his arm. Each contact sent a small shock through his system, as if her touch carried an electric charge. He found himself hyper-aware of her presence, of her scent, of the sound of her breathing. Outside, the forest had become a war zone. Plasma fire lit up the twilight as Rodriguez's team engaged what appeared to be dozens of Shadowkin warriors. The enemy had learned from the first encounter they were using the trees for cover, moving in coordinated groups, and showing a tactical sophistication that was deeply unsettling. "Extraction point is 2 clicks north," Rodriguez shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "We move fast, we stick together, and we shoot anything that isn't human." The running battle through the forest was like something from Marcus's worst nightmares. The Shadowkin seemed to materialize from the very shadows between the trees, their inhuman speed making them difficult targets. They fought with a desperation that suggested Lyraeli was far more important to them than just another captive. But Marcus found that his combat effectiveness had somehow improved. His reflexes were faster, his aim was more accurate, and he seemed to anticipate enemy movements before they happened. When he glanced at Lyraeli running beside him, he saw that she was watching him with an expression of satisfaction, as if this was exactly what she had expected. "What did you do to me?" he asked during a brief lull in the fighting. She smiled, and, for the first time he saw her fangs elegant, deadly, and undeniably real. I accepted your gift, she said. And, in doing so, I gave you one in return. You are stronger now, faster, more aware. The bond we share enhances you as it sustains me. Before Marcus could ask more questions, the extraction point came into view. The transport ship was already landing, its ramp lowering as the mercenary team sprinted across the clearing. Behind them, the forest erupted with Shadowkin forces, more than Marcus had seen in all his previous encounters combined. They made it aboard with seconds to spare, the ramp closing just as the first enemy reached the edge of the clearing. Through the viewports, Marcus could see hundreds of Shadowkin emerging from the forest, their glowing eyes turned upward toward the departing ship. Well, Rodriguez said as the transport broke atmosphere, that was officially the weirdest extraction I've ever been part of. He looked at Lyralii, who had settled into a seat beside Marcus. I suppose you're going to tell us why half the Shadowkin fleet was trying to capture you. Lyralii's expression grew serious, and, when she spoke, her words carried the weight of terrible knowledge. Because they know what I know. The Shadowkin are not just raiders, they are scouts for something far worse. Something that feeds on entire civilizations and leaves nothing but empty space behind. They were sent to capture me because I am one of the few remaining who remembers the last time it came, 3,000 years ago. She looked directly at Marcus, and he felt that strange connection pulse between them again. Your people call it the Devourer. And it is coming again, drawn by the conflicts between our species. The only chance any of our races have is to work together, to combine our strengths and knowledge. Rodriguez frowned. And why should we believe you? Lyralii's smile was sad and ancient. Because in 6 months, the outer colonies will begin going silent. In a year, the silence will reach the core worlds. And, in 2 years, if we do nothing, there will be nothing left of any of our civilizations but empty space and dead worlds. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. The woman he had saved, the alien princess who now claimed some kind of bond with him, was talking about the extinction of every intelligent species in the galaxy. And, somehow, he believed every word she said. The human military command center on Kepler Station buzzed with activity that bordered on panic. Admiral Sarachen stood before a massive holographic display showing the latest intelligence reports, her weathered face grim as she processed the implications. 3 outer colonies had gone silent in the past week, their communication arrays simply cutting out mid-transmission. No distress calls, no evidence of attack, just sudden, complete silence. Tell me again why we're taking strategic advice from a vampire, General Harrison muttered from across the briefing table. The graying officer had spent 40 years fighting alien threats, and he wasn't comfortable trusting one now, regardless of the circumstances. Marcus stepped forward from where he had been standing beside Lyralii. In the 2 weeks since the extraction from the forest moon, he had struggled to understand the changes happening to his body and mind. The bond Lyralii spoke of was real, he could feel her presence even when they were in different rooms, sense her emotions like echoes of his own. It should have terrified him. Instead, it felt natural, as if this was how he was meant to be. Because she's been right about everything so far, Marcus replied. The colonial blackouts, the Shadowkin attack patterns, even the locations where they would strike next. Her information has been verified by our own intelligence networks. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. The data supports her claims. What we're seeing matches historical patterns from conflicts 3 millennia ago, conflicts that supposedly ended in the complete destruction of 12 advanced civilizations. She turned to Lyralii, who sat with the composed dignity of someone accustomed to command. You're telling us this devourer entity has done this before? Lyralii rose gracefully from her chair. Despite being in a room full of humans who viewed her with suspicion, she commanded attention simply by existing. Her pale beauty was otherworldly, but it was her ancient eyes that held true power, eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires. Not just before, she said, her accented voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Repeatedly. The devourer exists outside normal space, feeding on the psychic energy generated by conflict and war. It sends scouts like the Shadowkin ahead to assess civilizations, to sow discord, to ensure maximum conflict when it arrives. She gestured to the holographic display, and, with a casual wave of her hand, the projection changed to show a map of the galaxy with red zones marking areas where civilizations had mysteriously vanished over the past 50,000 years. Each red zone represents a feeding, Lyralii continued. The pattern is always the same: first contact between species, followed by escalating conflicts, then, the arrival of the scouts, and, finally, the devourer itself. It consumes not just lives, but the very essence of what makes a species unique. Their art, their culture, their dreams, everything that defines them as a people. General Harrison leaned forward. You survived the last feeding. How? For the first time since Marcus had known her, Lyreliai's composure cracked slightly. Pain flickered across her features, and he felt an echo of ancient grief through their bond. My people didn't survive, she said quietly. I survived because I was off-world when the feeding began, negotiating trade agreements with the Zarek Empire. By the time I returned, Valdar was a dead world. Empty cities, silent forests, dead oceans. Billions of my people reduced to dust that tasted of despair. The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over the assembled officers. Marcus found himself stepping closer to her, drawn by an instinct to provide comfort. When his hand briefly touched her shoulder, he felt a pulse of gratitude through their connection. The Zarek thought they had won, Lyreliai continued. They celebrated the disappearance of their rivals, not understanding that they were next. Within 6 months, their entire empire was gone. The pattern repeated across the galaxy until only scattered remnants of various species remained, hiding in the dark spaces between stars. Admiral Chen studied the galactic map with the intensity of someone seeing battlefield strategies. You said the Devourer feeds on conflict. What happens if the species refuse to fight? Lyreliai's smile was bitter. The Shadow can ensure that is not an option. They excel at manipulation, at creating incidents that spark outrage and retaliation. They have been working in your space for decades, gradually increasing tensions between humanity and other species. The recent border skirmishes, the trade disputes, the diplomatic failures, how many of those do you think were organic developments? The implications struck the room like a physical blow. Marcus thought about his own military service, the conflicts he had fought in, the enemies he had faced. How many of those battles had been orchestrated by an outside force? Assuming you're right, General Harrison said slowly, what do you propose we do about it? If this thing is as powerful as you claim, how do we fight something that destroyed 12 advanced civilizations? Lyreliai turned to Marcus, and he felt her thoughts touching his mind through their bond. What she showed him made his breath catch, not words, but images, feelings, a vision of what could be possible. We do what no civilization has done before, Lyreliai said. We unite. All of us. Humans, Valdarians, Zarek, Kythera, even the machine intelligences of the Nexus Collective. The Devourer's power comes from division, from the psychic energy generated by conflict between species. But unity, cooperation, the joining of different strengths into a single purpose that creates a different kind of energy, one the Devourer cannot consume. She gestured again, and the holographic display changed to show a complex orbital structure surrounding a star. The design was unlike anything human engineers had conceived, incorporating elements from dozens of different architectural traditions. This is Haven Station, she said. A joint construction project that began shortly after the last feeding. Representatives from surviving species have been working together for 3,000 years, preparing for the Devourer's return. Building weapons, developing defenses, training joint forces. Admiral Chen studied the schematic with professional interest. The technology level is centuries beyond anything we currently possess. Because it combines the best of what each species can contribute, Lyreliai explained. Human adaptability and tactical innovation, Valdarian longevity and mystical knowledge, Zarek industrial capacity, Kythera scientific analysis. Alone, each species has weaknesses that can be exploited. Together, they become something greater than the sum of their parts. Marcus felt a surge of excitement through the bond. This was what Lyreliai had been working toward, what she had hoped to achieve through diplomatic contact with humanity. The crash, their meeting, even his decision to save her life, it was all part of a larger plan that spanned millennia. You're talking about abandoning thousands of years of human independence, General Harrison protested. Trusting species we've been fighting with for decades. You're talking about survival, Lyreliai countered. In 18 months, the Devourer will arrive in this sector. When it does, it won't care about your independence, your territorial disputes, or your species' pride. It will consume everything that lives in, thinks in, dreams, and then move on to the next sector. She stepped closer to the holographic display, her pale hand passing through the image of Haven Station. But if you join us, if humanity adds its strength to the alliance, we have a chance. Not just to survive, but to finally break the cycle. to ensure that no other species ever faces what mine did. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical implications. What would this alliance require from humanity? Initially, a commitment of resources and personnel for joint training exercises. Your best strategists, your most innovative engineers, your bravest warriors. They would work alongside their counterparts from other species, learning to fight as a unified force. Lyraliai's violet eyes found Marcus in the crowd. Some individuals would need to form deeper bonds, creating connections that allow for instantaneous coordination across vast distances. General Harrison followed her gaze to Marcus. Bonds like the one between you two? Marcus felt Lyraliai's amusement through their connection before she answered. The bonding process is voluntary, and it requires compatibility that is quite rare. But, when it works, it creates a tactical advantage that no purely technological solution can match. Perfect coordination, shared awareness, combined abilities that exceed what either individual could achieve alone. As if to demonstrate, Marcus found himself moving before he consciously decided to act. His body responded to threats he hadn't yet perceived, his hand drawing his sidearm and firing in a single fluid motion. The plasma bolt struck a ventilation grate across the room, and, a moment later, a Shadowkin infiltrator tumbled out, its form dissolving as it died. The room erupted into action, security personnel racing to check other potential entry points while alarms blared throughout the station. Marcus holstered his weapon, only then, realizing what had happened. He had known the enemy was there because Lyraliai had sensed it, and she had known he would act because she could feel his readiness through their bond. How long has it been there? Admiral Chen demanded as security teams swept the chamber. Lyraliai closed her eyes, extending her awareness through senses that operated beyond normal human perception. 7 minutes. It was observing, gathering intelligence about our defensive capabilities. There are others. Over the next hour, security teams found and eliminated 5 more Shadowkin infiltrators throughout the station. The aliens had penetrated defenses that were considered among the most sophisticated in human space, moving through ventilation systems and maintenance corridors with an intimate knowledge of the station's layout. How did they get so much detailed intelligence about our installations? General Harrison wondered as they reviewed the security footage. Marcus felt a chill as understanding dawned. They've been here for years, haven't they? Not just observing from outside, but infiltrating, learning, preparing. Lyraliai nodded grimly. The Shadowkin are patient. They spend decades establishing themselves in target civilizations, learning weaknesses, identifying key individuals, waiting for the optimal moment to strike. This infiltration is evidence that the Devourer's arrival is imminent. She turned to Admiral Chen with urgent intensity. You need to contact Haven Station immediately. If the Shadowkin are moving to active infiltration rather than passive observation, we have weeks at most before the feeding begins. The next few hours passed in a blur of encrypted communications and emergency protocols. Admiral Chen worked with her communications specialists to establish contact with Haven Station, using coordinates and encryption keys that Lyraliai provided. General Harrison coordinated with other human military commands, sharing intelligence about Shadowkin infiltration and potential countermeasures. Marcus found himself assigned as Lyraliai's liaison and bodyguard, a role that felt both natural and necessary given their bond. As they worked together, he began to understand the true scope of what she was asking humanity to undertake. You're not just talking about military cooperation, he said as they reviewed tactical data in a secure briefing room. You're talking about fundamental changes to how our species relates to the universe. Lyraliai looked up from a holographic display showing Shadowkin fleet movements. Yes. The old way of thinking, species against species, competition for resources, territorial expansion, that way leads only to the feeding. The Devourer has refined its tactics over millions of years, and it knows exactly how to exploit those patterns. She gestured to the display, showing how Shadowkin forces were positioning themselves around key human colonies. Look at the positioning. They're not trying to conquer territory. They're trying to force humanity into conflicts with neighboring species, to generate the fear and aggression that the Devourer needs. Marcus studied the tactical situation and felt a cold understanding settle over him. They want us to fight the Zarak over the disputed mining systems. And they want the Zarak to believe we're preparing for a major offensive. Exactly. And, when both species are locked in full-scale war, exhausting yourselves against each other, the Devourer will arrive to feast on the psychic energy generated by the conflict. Both civilizations will be too weak and too focused on each other to mount an effective defense. A communication alert interrupted their analysis. Admiral Chen's voice came through the chamber speakers with barely controlled excitement. We've established contact with Haven Station. They're transmitting authentication codes and requesting immediate conference with Princess Lyrelii. Commander Marcus, you're to accompany her as her designated liaison. Minutes later, Marcus found himself standing beside Lyrelii before a holographic communication array that filled half the chamber. The technology was clearly beyond current human capabilities, projecting not just images but somehow conveying presence, as if the people they were speaking with were actually in the room. The figures that materialized were unlike anything Marcus had expected. A tall, crystalline being that seemed to be made of living gemstones spoke with a voice like wind chimes. Beside it stood something that appeared to be a sentient energy pattern, shifting and flowing in colors that had no names. A massive insectoid creature with compound eyes and delicate mandibles waited patiently beside what appeared to be a robotic intelligence with features that suggested both machine precision and artistic beauty. Princess Lyrelii, the crystalline being spoke, we had feared you were lost when the diplomatic mission failed to reach human space. The mission succeeded, just not as planned, Lyrelii replied. Humanity is ready to join the Alliance. They have seen the evidence of Shadowkin infiltration and understand the threat. The energy being pulsed with what might have been relief. Excellent. Our deep space sensors confirm the Devourer has begun its approach. We estimate 60 standard days before it reaches the outer edge of this sector. Marcus felt his stomach drop. 2 months to prepare for something that had destroyed a dozen advanced civilizations. The insectoid creature clicked its mandibles in what Marcus somehow recognized as concern. The Shadowkin have accelerated their timeline. We are detecting massive fleet movements throughout the sector. They are positioning to trigger multiple conflicts simultaneously. Then, we move to phase 2 of the contingency plan, Lyrelii said with calm authority. All Alliance forces converge on the predetermined coordinates. We begin full integration protocols immediately. The robotic intelligence spoke for the first time, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested vast computational capacity. The human military will need to be brought up to Alliance standards quickly. Their technology base is adequate, but their tactical thinking is still locked into single-species paradigms. Admiral Chen stepped forward, her expression set with military determination. Admiral Chen, commanding Kepler Station and representing human military interests. What do you need from us? Everything, the crystalline being replied. Your ships, your soldiers, your scientists, your philosophers. The Devourer feeds on more than just military conflict, it consumes the entire cultural output of a civilization. We need humanity's unique perspectives integrated into our defense matrix. Marcus felt Lyrelii's hand slip into his, and, through their bond, he sensed the weight of responsibility she carried. For 3,000 years, she had worked toward this moment, preparing for humanity's integration into the Alliance. The survival of every thinking being in the galaxy might depend on how well humans could adapt to fighting as part of a larger whole. How do we begin? Admiral Chen asked. The energy being flowed closer to the communication array. Selected human personnel will transfer to Haven Station for accelerated training. They will learn to fight alongside alien allies, to think in terms of combined arms tactics involving technologies and abilities they have never encountered. It paused, its pattern shifting to focus on Marcus. Those humans who have formed bonds with Alliance members will serve as coordination nodes, allowing for real-time tactical communication across light years of space. Marcus realized that his life as a simple mercenary was over. Whatever the bond with Lyrelii had made him, he was now something more than human, and something less. A bridge between species, a living connection that might help save the galaxy. I'm in, he said simply. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. Humanity stands with the Alliance. Tell us what we need to do. Haven Station was a marvel that defied every assumption Marcus had ever held about engineering and physics. The massive structure orbited a binary star system, its twisting spires and interconnected modules stretching across hundreds of kilometers. From his viewport aboard the transport ship, Marcus could see docking bays designed for vessels of every conceivable configuration, sleek human destroyers nestled beside organic-looking Kythera bioships, angular Xeric industrial haulers sharing space with crystalline formations that seemed to grow rather than be built. First time seeing true Alliance architecture, Lyrelii said from beside him. How does it feel through our bond? Marcus concentrated, trying to understand the sensations flooding through his enhanced awareness. It feels alive. Not just functional, but purposeful. Like every part was designed to work with every other part. He paused, struggling to put the experience into words. It feels like harmony made physical. Through their bond, he sensed Lyraliai's approval. The changes in him continued to evolve daily: enhanced reflexes, improved pattern recognition, and intuitive understanding of tactics that seemed to come from nowhere. But, more than that, he was beginning to think differently, to see problems from perspectives that weren't purely human. The transport docked with a soft vibration that suggested artificial gravity fields rather than mechanical contact. As they disembarked, Marcus got his first close look at the Alliance representatives who had gathered to meet the human delegation. The Kythera ambassador was a being of impossible beauty, tall and graceful, with skin that shifted through subtle color patterns and eyes that held depths like ocean trenches. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated in frequencies beyond human hearing. "Welcome to Haven Station," she said, addressing Admiral Chen and the other human officers. "I am Synthesis Singer Aelin. Your arrival marks the completion of the Great Circle. All sapient species of this galaxy arm now stand united against the Devourer." Beside her stood a Zarak commander whose massive frame was covered in what appeared to be living metal armor. The technology interfaced directly with his nervous system, creating a seamless fusion of biological and mechanical systems. When he moved, servo motors whined softly, amplifying his already impressive physical capabilities. "I am Warforged Raven," he rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. "Your reputation precedes you, Admiral Chen. The Zarak High Command speaks highly of human tactical innovation." He paused, optical sensors focusing on Marcus. "And you are the bonded one we have heard about. Interesting." The crystalline being from their earlier communication materialized nearby, its faceted form refracting the station's lighting into rainbow patterns. "I am Harmonic Resonance, speaking for the Crystal Collective. We have prepared training scenarios that will challenge your human perspectives on warfare and cooperation." But it was the machine intelligence that captured Marcus's attention. The robot was clearly artificial, but its design suggested an artistic sensibility that went far beyond mere function. Flowing curves and elegant proportions made it beautiful in a way that transcended its mechanical nature. "I am Synthesis Node 7, representing the Nexus Collective," it said, its voice carrying subtle harmonics that suggested vast computational power. "We have analyzed human tactical patterns and identified areas where your species' unique strengths can be amplified through integration with Alliance systems." Admiral Chen stepped forward with military precision. "Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding the human delegation. We're here to learn, to integrate, and to prepare for the coming conflict. What do you need from us?" Synthesis Singer Aelin gestured gracefully toward a corridor that seemed to stretch infinitely into the station's depths. "Everything begins with understanding. Your officers will be paired with Alliance counterparts to learn combined arms tactics. Your engineers will work with our technicians to adapt your equipment for Alliance standardization. Your strategists will study the Devourer's patterns with our analysts." As they walked through the station, Marcus marveled at the seamless integration of different architectural styles and technologies. Human efficiency blended with Kythera organic curves, Zarak industrial strength supported crystalline formations that sang with their own inner frequencies, while Nexus collective data streams flowed through it all like luminous rivers. "The station itself is the first lesson," Lyraliai explained as they passed through what appeared to be a vast garden where representatives of different species worked side by side. Each species contributed what they do best, but the result is something none of us could have achieved alone. Warforged Raven indicated a massive chamber where human soldiers were training alongside alien warriors. "Your troops learn quickly," he observed. "But they think in terms of human limitations. Here, they must learn to think in terms of combined capabilities." Through the transparent walls, Marcus could see human marines working with Kythera warriors whose natural agility and supernatural awareness complemented human tactical thinking. Zarak heavy assault troops provided mobile cover while Nexus collective drones coordinated everything with split-second precision. "The Devourer's greatest advantage has always been that it faces divided enemies," Harmonic Resonance chimed. "Separate species fighting separately, never coordinating their strengths. We changed that paradigm." They entered a massive command center where holographic displays showed real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where Shadowkin forces were massing, while green indicators tracked Alliance fleet movements. The scale of the operation was staggering: thousands of ships, millions of personnel, all coordinating across light years of space. 43 days until the Devourer reaches the outer system, Synthesis Node 7 reported. Shadowkin forces are moving to trigger conflicts in 17 sectors simultaneously. They seek to create maximum psychic disruption before their master arrives. Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays with professional intensity. What's our response protocol? We deny them the conflicts they seek, Lyralii answered. Alliance fleets move to interpose between potential combatants. Instead of fighting each other, we present a unified front against Shadowkin manipulation. Marcus felt a stirring of excitement through the bond. This was strategy on a scale that no single species had ever attempted. What about the Devourer itself? When it arrives, how do we fight something that destroyed 12 civilizations? Synthesis Singer Aylin's color pattern shifted to what Marcus somehow recognized as anticipation. We show you that now. Come, witness the weapon that 3,000 years of cooperation have created. They traveled deeper into the station, through sections where the very architecture seemed to pulse with contained energy. The sensation through Marcus's enhanced awareness was overwhelming, power beyond anything he had ever imagined, held in careful balance by technologies that merged the mystical with the scientific. The chamber they entered was vast beyond comprehension, its walls curving away into distances that suggested pocket dimensions or folded space. At the center, suspended in fields of pure energy, was something that made Marcus's mind struggle to process what he was seeing. The Unity engine, Lyralii whispered beside him. The combined creation of every Alliance species, powered by bonds like ours, channeling the cooperative energy of an entire civilization instead of the destructive force of conflict. The device was beautiful and terrible, crystalline matrices that sang with harmonic frequencies, organic components that pulsed with life, mechanical precision that calculated possibilities across multiple dimensions, and, at the center of it all, points of light that Marcus realized represented bonded pairs from every Alliance species. The Devourer feeds on the energy of discord, Warforged Draven explained. Fear, hatred, the desire to destroy what is different. The Unity engine channels the opposite: cooperation, understanding, the desire to create something greater than any single part. Synthesis Node 7's optical sensors focused on Marcus. Your bond with Princess Lyralii represents one connection point in a network that spans the galaxy. When the Devourer arrives, every bonded pair will contribute their combined strength to the engine. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. You're talking about using us as living conduits. We are talking about victory, harmonic resonance chimed. For the first time in cosmic history, an entire galactic arm united not in conquest but in cooperation. The Devourer has never faced such a force. Through his bond with Lyralii, Marcus felt her memories stirring images of her homeworld before the last feeding, thriving cities and soaring spires, art and music and dreams that span millennia. All of it reduced to silence in a single feeding cycle. Will it work? Admiral Chen asked quietly. Unknown, Synthesis Singer Aylin admitted, her colors shifting to uncertainty. The theoretical models are promising, but we have never faced the Devourer with such preparation. Much depends on how quickly your species can integrate with Alliance protocols. Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into training with an intensity that surprised even him. The bond with Lyralii continued to evolve, allowing them to coordinate their actions with increasing precision. In combat simulations, they functioned as a single unit, her supernatural senses and mystical abilities combining with his tactical thinking and enhanced physical capabilities. But, more than that, Marcus found himself learning from the other bonded pairs. A human engineer named Sarah had formed a bond with the Nexus collective intelligence, creating a fusion of human intuition and machine precision that revolutionized equipment design. A Zarek warrior called Iron Fist had bonded with a Kythera dancer, their combined abilities creating a fighting style that was both devastatingly effective and strangely beautiful. Each bond is unique, Lyralii explained as they practiced in a zero-gravity combat chamber. The connection enhances what each individual brings, but it also creates something entirely new. You are not just human anymore, Marcus, and I am not simply Valdarian. We are something that has never existed before. The truth of that became apparent during advanced tactical exercises. Marcus found that he could perceive battlefield conditions through senses that operated beyond normal human limitations. Lyralii's mystical awareness combined with his tactical training allowed them to anticipate enemy movements with uncanny accuracy. In one particularly challenging simulation, they were pitted against a Shadowkin infiltration force in a recreation of Haven Station's corridors. The enemy used their shadow manipulation abilities to become nearly invisible, striking from unexpected angles with weapons that phased through normal matter. But Marcus and Lyralii moved through the maze like dancers, each always knowing where the other was, their actions coordinated without need for communication. When Shadowkin attacked from behind, Marcus was already turning to engage them. When enemies attempted to flank their position, Lyralii was there to intercept them. Flawless execution, Warforged Draven observed as the simulation ended. Your coordination exceeds theoretical models. How do you achieve such precision? Marcus looked at Lyralii, trying to find words for something that transcended normal explanation. It's not coordination, he said finally. It's unity. I don't think about where she is or what she's doing because I am where she is, and she is doing what I'm doing. We're not two people working together, we're one person with two bodies. The implications of that realization would have troubled him once. Now, it felt like coming home. But, their personal growth was overshadowed by the larger strategic situation developing across the galaxy. Intelligence reports flowing into Haven Station painted an increasingly grim picture. Shadowkin forces had succeeded in triggering conflicts in 7 sectors, and the psychic energy generated by those wars was already strengthening the Devourer's approach. 31 days until arrival, Synthesis Node 7 reported during a command briefing. Enemy manipulation has generated significant Discord energy. The Devourer is accelerating faster than predicted. Admiral Chen studied the tactical displays with growing concern. Can we intervene in the conflicts? Alliance fleets are moving to contain the fighting, Synthesis Singer Aelin replied, but the damage is already done. Once psychic energy begins feeding the Devourer, the process becomes self-reinforcing. Fear of the approaching entity generates more conflict, which strengthens it further. Marcus felt Lyralii's distress through their bond. 3,000 years of preparation, and they might still fail because they couldn't overcome the fundamental nature of intelligent species to fight each other when frightened. There is another option, harmonic resonance suggested, its crystalline form resonating with harmonics that suggested deep contemplation. We could activate the Unity engine early, use its power to directly intervene in the conflicts. Warforged Draven's servos whined as he turned to face the crystal being. The engine is not fully charged. Early activation would reduce its effectiveness when we face the Devourer directly. But, if we allow the conflicts to continue, we may face an entity too powerful for even the completed engine to defeat, Synthesis Node 7 calculated. The debate that followed revealed the true complexity of their situation. Every choice carried risks that could doom the entire galaxy. Too cautious, and the Devourer would arrive at full strength. Too aggressive, and they would face it with inadequate preparation. Marcus felt an idea stirring through his bond with Lyralii, not his thought or hers, but something that emerged from their unity. What if we don't try to stop the conflicts directly, he said. What if we join them, but not as combatants? Admiral Chan raised an eyebrow. Explain. The bonded pairs, Lyralii continued, following the shared thought. We insert them into the conflict zones, not to fight in the wars, but to demonstrate unity in the midst of discord. Show the combatants what cooperation looks like. Marcus nodded, the idea crystallizing as they spoke. The Devourer feeds on division and fear. But, if we can introduce harmony into its food source, we might be able to disrupt its feeding process. Synthesis Singer Aelin's colors shifted through patterns that suggested intense consideration. Unprecedented. Dangerous. But, theoretically sound. Discord energy might be neutralized by direct contact with Unity energy. It would require placing bonded pairs in active war zones, Warforged Draven pointed out. The casualty rates would be significant. Everything we've built depends on those bonds, Admiral Chen added. If we lose too many, the Unity engine won't have enough power sources when the Devourer arrives. Marcus felt Lyralii's hand slip into his, their bond pulsing with shared determination. It's a risk we have to take, he said. Because if we do nothing, we'll face the Devourer at maximum strength with no hope of victory. The room fell silent as each representative considered the implications. They were talking about gambling the survival of galactic civilization on an untested theory, using irreplaceable resources in a desperate attempt to change the fundamental nature of an entity that had never been successfully opposed. I volunteer for the first insertion, Marcus said into the silence. Through their bond, he felt Lyraliai's fierce pride and absolute unity with his decision. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, as they had faced everything since that first moment when he chose to save her life. Now, it seemed, that choice might end up saving the galaxy. The Kepler-7 system was tearing itself apart when Marcus and Lyraliai arrived. 2 mining colonies, 1 human and 1 Zarek, had been locked in escalating conflict for 6 weeks. What had begun as disputes over asteroid mining rights had exploded into full-scale warfare, with civilian casualties mounting on both sides. From the bridge of their specially modified scout ship, Marcus watched plasma fire streak between opposing battle stations. The Shadowkin manipulation was evident in the pattern of escalation. Each side's most aggressive actions had been precisely timed to provoke maximum retaliation from their opponents. The Discord energy is visible from here, Lyraliai said, her mystical senses picking up emanations that no human technology could detect. Like a wound in space itself, bleeding fear and hatred into the void. Through their bond, Marcus felt what she perceived, a sickening wrongness that made reality itself feel unstable. The psychic energy generated by the conflict was literally warping local spacetime, creating distortions that would guide the Devourer directly to this system. Contact from both sides reported their communications specialist, a young human officer named Lieutenant Torres, who had volunteered for the experimental insertion mission. The humans are demanding we identify ourselves as friend or enemy. The Zarek are ordering us to leave their space immediately. Marcus activated the ship's general broadcast system. All combatants, this is Commander Marcus Chen aboard the Alliance vessel Unity's Hope. We come under protocols established by the Haven Accords. Request immediate ceasefire for humanitarian assistance. The response was predictable and depressing. Both sides accused him of being in league with their enemies, of trying to trick them into vulnerable positions. Weapons locks began appearing on their ship as both human and Zarek forces prepared to fire on what they perceived as a threat. They cannot hear us through their fear, Lyraliai observed sadly. The Shadowkin have done their work too well. Each side sees only enemies and betrayers. Marcus felt their bond pulse with shared understanding. This was why previous civilizations had fallen to the Devourer, not because they lacked courage or strength, but because fear made them incapable of recognizing salvation when it appeared. Then, we make them see, Marcus decided. Lyraliai, are you ready for full bond manifestation? Her violet eyes met his, and he felt her absolute trust and determination. Together, as always. What happened next would have been impossible for either of them alone. Marcus engaged the ship's engines, diving directly between the 2 fleets in a maneuver that should have resulted in immediate destruction. But, as plasma fire converged on their position, Lyraliai extended her mystical abilities through their bond, creating a field of pure unity energy around their vessel. The weapon's fire didn't bounce off or dissipate, it was transformed. The destructive energy meant to tear their ship apart instead became something else entirely, waves of harmonious power that spread outward from their position like ripples in a cosmic pond. On the human battle station, Admiral Reyes felt the wave of energy wash over her bridge and experienced something she had never felt before: absolute certainty of her enemy's perspective. For a brief moment, she saw the conflict through Zarek eyes, felt their genuine fear that humanity was trying to steal resources needed for their colony ships, understood their desperation to protect their children. War Commander Thak on the Zarek heavy cruiser experienced the same impossible empathy. He felt human determination to protect their own families, their confusion at what seemed like unprovoked Zarek aggression, their growing certainty that they faced an implacable alien enemy. Both commanders found themselves lowering their weapons, not out of weakness but out of sudden understanding that their enemy was not evil, just afraid, just trying to protect what they loved. What just happened? Lieutenant Torres asked in wonder, staring at her displays as weapon locks throughout both fleets began disengaging. We showed them each other, Marcus replied, feeling the strain of the bond manifestation. The technique required both partners to open themselves completely, sharing not just their own perspectives but channeling the viewpoints of everyone around them. Lyraliai swayed slightly, caught between exhaustion and exhilaration. The unity energy is spreading on its own now. Each person who experiences true empathy becomes a transmitter, sharing understanding with others around them. Over the following hours, they watched the miracle of reconciliation unfold across both fleets. Human and Zarek officers began communicating directly, sharing intelligence about their respective situations. They discovered that both sides had experienced equipment failures and supply shortages at suspiciously convenient times, clear signs of Shadowkin manipulation. But, more than that, they began working together. Zarek heavy industry combined with human innovation to develop more efficient mining techniques that could extract needed resources without depleting the asteroid fields. Human medical expertise helped treat Zarek colonists suffering from a plague that had weakened their position, while Zarek defensive technology protected human settlements from meteor impacts. The transformation is remarkable, reported Synthesis Node 7 through their quantum communicator. Unity energy readings from your location have increased by 400%. The Discord distortion is collapsing. Marcus felt a surge of hope through the bond. They had proved the theory worked. Unity energy could indeed neutralize the psychic discord that fed the Devourer. But, as he was about to respond to Haven Station, alarms began blaring throughout their ship. Massive spatial distortion detected, Lieutenant Torres announced, her voice tight with alarm. Something huge is dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The main display showed a sight that froze Marcus's blood. Emerging from the swirling vortex of a hyperspace exit was something that defied description, vast beyond measure, its surface shifting between dimensions as if it existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Parts of it seemed solid, other sections appeared to be pure energy, and, still others looked like empty space that somehow maintained form and purpose. The Devourer, Lyralii whispered, her face pale with ancient terror. It is early. Our disruption of its food source has drawn it here directly. Marcus activated their emergency beacon, sending a priority alert to Haven Station while trying to process what he was seeing. The entity was easily the size of a moon, but size was perhaps the least disturbing thing about it. As it moved through space, reality itself seemed to bend around its presence. Stars flickered and changed color, space-time twisted into impossible geometries, and a sense of wrongness so profound it was almost physical radiated outward from its form. All ships, this is Commander Chen, Marcus broadcast on all frequencies. The primary threat has arrived. Implement emergency protocols immediately. All civilians to evacuation positions. But, even as he spoke, Marcus could see it was too late for evacuation. The Devourer's presence was already affecting the system, causing navigation equipment to malfunction and hyperspace lanes to collapse. Whatever happened next would happen here, with whatever forces they currently had available. The entity began to feed almost immediately. Tendrils of dark energy extended from its core, reaching toward both fleets with obvious hunger. Where the tendrils touched space, reality became unstable. Marcus watched in horror as a Zarek frigate simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but somehow negated, leaving behind only a void-shaped hole in space. It's not just eating the ships, Lyralii said, her mystical senses allowing her to perceive the true horror. It's consuming the concepts of the ships, the ideas that brought them into being. If it finishes feeding here, those designs will never be invented again, anywhere in the universe. Marcus felt understanding dawn with terrible clarity. This was how the Devourer operated. It didn't just destroy civilizations, it deleted them from reality itself. No wonder previous attempts at resistance had failed. How could anyone fight an enemy that could erase the very ideas needed to oppose it? But, even as despair threatened to overwhelm him, Marcus felt something else through the bond, Lyralii's fierce determination and the growing strength of the unity field they had created. The humans and Zarek in the system weren't fleeing in terror or fighting each other. They were working together, their combined efforts creating a barrier of cooperative energy that the Devourer's feeding tendrils couldn't penetrate. It's working, he said in amazement. The unity field is protecting them. For now, Lyralii agreed. But, the Devourer is adapting. It has never encountered unified resistance before. It is learning. Even as she spoke, the entity's approach changed. Instead of simply extending feeding tendrils, it began projecting something else, waves of pure terror and paranoia that struck directly at the minds of everyone in the system. The message was clear and irresistible: your allies will betray you, trust no one, save yourself while you still can. Marcus felt the unity field wavering as fear crept into the minds of the human and Zarek crews. The carefully built cooperation began to fracture as ancient species prejudices reasserted themselves under the pressure of existential terror. We're losing them, Lieutenant Torres reported as weapon locks began reappearing throughout both fleets. Both sides are reverting to defensive positions. Through the bond, Marcus felt Lyralii drawing on reserves of strength she had built up over 3 millennia of preparation. Not yet, she said grimly. We have one more option. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Lyralii began to sing. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard, not just music, but something that operated on frequencies that touched the soul directly. It was a song of memory, of loss, of hope maintained through centuries of darkness, and of bonds that transcended the barriers between species. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Every person in the system, human and Zarek alike, suddenly experienced a vision of Lyraliai's memories. They saw her homeworld as it had been before the last feeding, a paradise of art and music and dreams spanning millennia. They felt her grief at its loss, her determination to prevent the same fate from befalling others, and her joy at discovering that unity between species was not only possible but beautiful. Marcus found himself at the center of the vision, his choice to save a dying alien princess resonating through the minds of everyone present. They felt his confusion, his growing understanding, and, finally, his complete acceptance that differences between species were sources of strength rather than division. The unity field exploded outward from their position with a force that made space itself ring like a struck bell. The Devourer's sphere projection shattered against the wave of absolute trust and cooperation, and, for the first time since its arrival, the entity paused in its feeding. Impossible, came a voice that spoke directly into every mind in the system. The Devourer itself was communicating, its ancient intelligence focused on the phenomenon that had disrupted its feeding. Sentient species do not unify. They compete, they destroy, they provide sustenance. This is the pattern that has never changed. Marcus felt Lyraliai's hand grip his as they became the focal point for something larger than themselves. Through their bond flowed the combined will of every human and Zarek in the system, their unity creating a force that the Devourer could not comprehend. Patterns can change, Marcus said, his voice somehow carrying across space without technological assistance. We choose cooperation over competition, unity over division, hope over fear. The entity's response was immediate and terrifying. If it could not feed on discord in this system, it would simply destroy everything and move on. Energy beams that could crack planets began charging along its impossible surface, preparing to sterilize the entire system. But, before the Devourer could fire, new contacts began appearing throughout the system. Alliance ships dropping out of hyperspace in perfect coordination, Kythera organic vessels growing from dimensional seeds, Zarek heavy cruisers translating in with mechanical precision, crystalline formations that sang themselves into reality. And, leading them all, Haven Station itself, the massive structure somehow mobile despite its size, its unity engine blazing with the combined power of thousands of bonded pairs across the galaxy. You wanted to feed on an entire galactic arm, synthesis singer Aylan's voice rang through space, amplified by technologies that merged science with art. Now face that entire galactic arm united in purpose. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy chose its future. Not a battle of weapons against weapons, but a clash between two fundamental philosophies, the Devourer's ancient certainty that division was the natural state of sentient life, and the Alliance's new vision of what unity could accomplish. Marcus and Lyraliai found themselves at the center of it all, their bond serving as a template for the massive coordination effort required to operate the Unity engine. Through them flowed the combined will of billions of beings, all choosing to trust in each other rather than give in to fear. The energy that erupted from Haven Station was nothing like the destructive force the Devourer used. Instead of negating and consuming, it created and strengthened. Where the Unity field touched the Devourer's dark tendrils, they were not destroyed but transformed, becoming conduits for cooperation rather than consumption. For the first time in cosmic history, the Devourer found itself unable to feed. More than that, it found its own nature being changed by contact with true unity. The entity that had existed for millions of years as pure hunger began to experience something it had never known, the possibility of satisfaction through creation rather than destruction. What is this? The Devourer's voice carried notes of confusion and something that might have been wonder. This is what we choose to be, Lyraliai replied, her voice joined by those of every bonded pair in the Alliance. Not perfect, not without conflict, but willing to work together towards something greater than any of us could achieve alone. The transformation was visible across multiple dimensions. The Devourer's form began to shift, dark energy giving way to patterns of light and harmony. The entity that had consumed 12 civilizations was learning, for the first time, what it meant to contribute to something rather than simply take from it. But the victory came with a price. The energy required to transform rather than destroy something as vast as the Devourer was enormous. Marcus felt bonds throughout the galaxy beginning to strain under the load, bonded pairs giving everything they had to maintain the unity field. Through his connection with Lyraliai, he felt her making a choice that terrified him. She was preparing to channel the full power of their bond into the unity engine, an act that would save the galaxy but likely cost them both their lives. No, he said firmly, his hand tightening on hers. We do this together or not at all. She turned to look at him, her violet eyes bright with tears and determination. Marcus, the galaxy needs the galaxy needs proof that unity doesn't require sacrifice, he interrupted. That working together makes everyone stronger, not just the cause they serve. Through their bond, he felt the moment when understanding dawned. The Unity engine didn't need them to destroy themselves, it needed them to demonstrate that bonds could be sources of mutual strength rather than mutual consumption. Together, they redirected the flow of energy, not pouring their lives into the engine but using their connection to show the devourer what it could become. Instead of an entity that existed by consuming others, it could transform into something that grew through cooperation and mutual support. The change was gradual but undeniable. The devourer's hunger began to transform into curiosity, its need to consume becoming a desire to understand and create. The entity that had brought fear to an entire galaxy began to sing not words, but harmonies that enhanced the unity field instead of disrupting it. When the transformation was complete, the being that had once been the devourer spoke with a voice that carried wonder and gratitude. I understand now. Hunger can become satisfaction. Isolation can become connection. We have been alone so long, we forgot that there were other ways to exist. Marcus felt exhaustion wash over him as the Unity engine powered down, its work complete. Around them, the Alliance fleet maintained defensive positions, but there was no longer anything to defend against. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known had become its newest ally. Is it over? Lieutenant Torres asked in amazement. Marcus looked at Lyralii, feeling their bond pulse with shared satisfaction and continuing love. No, he said. It's just beginning. Now we get to see what the galaxy can become when everyone works together. Through their connection, he felt the future spreading out before them, not perfect, not without challenges, but filled with possibilities that no single species could have imagined alone. The human fighter who had given his blood to save a dying princess had helped give birth to a new age of galactic cooperation. And, at the center of it all, their bond remained proof that differences between people could become sources of strength rather than division, that love could transcend any barrier, and that sometimes the greatest victories came not from defeating enemies but from transforming them into friends. 1 year after the transformation of the Devourer, Marcus stood on the observation deck of New Haven Station and watched something that still filled him with wonder: ships from dozens of species working together to construct the galaxy's first truly integrated colony. The massive project stretched across 3 star systems, each world being terraformed according to the needs of different species while maintaining perfect ecological balance. The Zarek heavy construction vessels are ahead of schedule, Lieutenant Torres reported from her new position as coordinator of interspecies engineering projects. The Kythera bioshapers estimate they can have the atmospheric processing complete within 2 months. Marcus nodded, still amazed at how smoothly such complex operations ran when every species contributed their greatest strengths. What once would have taken decades for any single civilization to accomplish was being completed in a fraction of the time through genuine cooperation. And the human settlements, he asked. Thriving, Torres smiled. The agricultural specialists are working with Kythera life shapers to develop crops that will grow in 30 different atmospheric compositions. We're feeding people who breathe methane and others who require sulfur compounds, all from the same basic plant strains. Through his bond with Lyralii, Marcus felt her approaching before she appeared in the doorway. The connection between them had continued to deepen over the past year, but it had also evolved in ways neither of them had expected. Where once they had needed to concentrate to share thoughts and sensations, now the sharing was as natural as breathing. The council meeting is starting, she said, slipping her hand into his. They